I wonder if we could discern a little bit, Brad. I forget how you put it, but before we started recording, you were talking about just the measures of the world or the standards of the world. How do we discern whether or not those are good standards, and if we're called to them or not? Yeah. So like, it's assumed that I should pay for my kids' college, right? And so maybe it's like, oh shoot, well I can't give because I have to pay for my kids' college someday, and so I'm either giving less or I'm not giving at all because of that. Or it's assumed that I need to leave my kids something, and so like, how do we question those assumptions that the culture has said are assumptions, and have we actually brought those to the Lord to purify them and say, like, God, do you want this for me and for my kids? Like, do you want me to leave my kids an inheritance, or do you want me to build your inheritance? Like, how do we wrestle with that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is I'm glad you brought it up, because for me, it's one of the hardest topics to talk about, because you don't want to be considered a castaway, right? Like, you don't want to start challenging presuppositions that everyone has for them to immediately write you off.
Principles of discernment are probably the important thing. So like going to the Lord and asking, what do you want? Like, and so I don't necessarily think there is no objective truth whether or not you should pay for your kids' college or not, right? So the only way to answer that question is through prayer and to ask the Lord, what do you want from me? And there is no objective truth on what kind of a vacation you should take annually, or how many vacations you should take annually, and how much money should go towards vacation. There's no objective truth on how much you should spend on a car, and should you buy a new car with all of the custom fixings, or should you buy a used car, right? There's no objective truth there, but the one truth is the Lord speaks to you, and you have a conscience. and so like the key is to ask the Lord about these things, because he doesn't care just about your Sunday morning. He cares about everything. He's the Lord of everything. So he's the Lord of the decision you make on what car you buy. He is the Lord of the decision you make of how you go on vacation. He's the Lord of the decision you make on how you raise your children and what you do for your children when you're no longer here. And as long as he's a part of those conversations, and you're wrestling with biblical truths, and you're listening to the voice of God in those truths, I think that's probably the first key of making wise decisions. And I don't know if with our finances we do that enough, right? I think we do it with some matters of prayer, like, oh, okay, Lord, like, where do you want me to give my time at the parish, or how do you want me to spend time with you in prayer? But he's the Lord over all.
But he's a person. That's a personal matter,
right?
It does kind of feel like that. It's like, I talk to the Lord about these things, but finance, I mean, that's like.
Or if it's offensive, like we're offended, and I'm annoyed too sometimes. But just like, you don't want to go to church to like hear about finances, but like the more we know about the missional work of the church, the missional opportunities of the church, like it actually helps form our conscience. And so if I don't know that the school has a need, or if I don't know that that the Ukraine Relief Fund is available for me to give to, then I don't have the opportunity to even know, like, is God asking me to give this? So when someone asks you to give, that's your opportunity to ask God, am I called to give, right? And we should give wisely, right? We don't want to give to... I think sometimes we don't give because we're like, I don't trust that. Good. Like, if you don't trust that, maybe there's something to that. So give to what you trust. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said too. I mean, I kind of wrestle going back and forth with this whole conversation, because I wonder, would the three of us be in a different place in having this conversation 10 years ago? If we were in a place of less stability financially, right?
That's a good word.
I mean, I'm wrestling right now. Like, our family's been looking for a home for the last 2 years, and like there's a big part of my heart that I'm wrestling with the Lord every single day. Like, God, let me surrender this. God, let me surrender this. Help me surrender this, because the reality is it has a hold on me, and it's fighting for that hold on me, and so I think there's something to be said for entering into a conversation. Or just operating from a self-knowledge of asking, what is it that sits on the throne of my heart?
Yep.
Like, and how do I come into a place of, on a daily basis, making the determination, like, today, my life is not going to be driven by the motivation of this worldly passion or this worldly
the
desire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were talking about the precepts of the church earlier, right?
Yeah, sure.
And this idea that there are things that I have to expect myself to participate in a certain way if I'm going to live a certain life.
Yeah.
And you know, kind of to take it full circle and to answer that question again, or to address that question again of why is the tithe important? I think it's important because like I need to have a standard in my life that I realize like I can't trust my own discernment based on emotion on a particular day. Like I have to make a line in the sand and say this is the standard up to which I'm going to live. And you know, I think it's even appropriate as we're speaking to an audience that's predominantly young adults in this podcast. Like the reality is, friends, we are not the ones who are giving in a way that's sustaining the church right now, and that's a big problem. You know, we were talking with our buddy Matt, who's the chair of our board of directors, and he's been working closely with the Diocese of Columbus in such a way that he was sharing yesterday that the demographics, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise, that like the vast majority of the giving that is sustaining our church is coming from individuals who are 55 and over.
Yep.
And like what that means is that in 30 years, the landscape of the church is going to shift by necessity, right? So friends, we've got to come into a place of wrestling with this to ask, you know, we've operated for a long time based on the generosity of our parents and our grandparents. And we have a choice to make as far as what kind of an impact we're going to leave and what kind of a footprint we're going to leave in the kingdom. And whether the kingdom's going to operate with the same level of support or better. And I'd like to suggest that you know, the battle today is going to be a heck of a lot more expensive than it was 25, 30 years ago. And without us giving our lives away, it's just not going to work.
And it's why